Hello and welcome to Perch Peak Pods, the only place to get long-form interviews with some of the world's leading global mobility experts. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Tamara Dykes, Senior Manager for Global Mobility at OpenText's, amongst many other glittering career highlights. So Tamara, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So much to talk to you about today, but let's go right back to the beginning and introduce yourself to the community and tell us how you fell into the world of global mobility.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. So my career started out, it's a unique story, but I grew up in tourism and I started out in legal, fell into HR in the law firms, and then moved over to accounting firms where I got into campus recruitment, experience recruitment, and then into international recruitment, which eventually led me into global mobility.
Wow.
During my career, I've worked sort of on both sides of the fence, which is great, sort of at relocation companies as well as in-house global mobility programs, which I think has really strengthened my ability to see things and look at it from all sorts of perspectives. And so I love global mobility. It's definitely what I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of excited about the future. But so that's sort of my highlights of my career.
I love that. So many questions, and we're immediately going to go off script. So let's roll with it.
Sure.
You mentioned there that you've worked on both sides for relocation providers, several in-house roles. What's one thing that you think would be surprising to people about working in-house if you're working on the provider side? What do you think is one thing that is like, oh, I didn't expect to do so much of this, or this is really much different than I thought it would be?
So on the in-house side?
Yeah, on the in-house side.
On the in-house side, I think the hardest thing for people when you move from being on the provider side and then coming in-house is that you've now got one company that you're focusing on, and it is particular to the company culture, right? And I think so. Global mobility programs work both, the same, both sides of the fence. But once you're in-house, you have to comply with the business and what the culture is and what the roadmap for the company is. And so the biggest challenge coming to a tech company was, that they function differently. They're more entrepreneurial. Risk factors are different, from a corporate company to, tech, which is more, or lenient, I guess, and it's growing. So how do you apply all of those principles around mobility to the business and what the business wants? And so that I think is the most surprising thing walking into the company.
Yeah, such an interesting is that you sort of think, all in-house roles will not be the same, but you're going to be using your mobility toolkit. But actually, you've got the scenario of the company, the industry, the culture that you have to navigate. So that's super interesting. The other thing I wanted to go back to was around you mentioned that mobility is your passion. You started in tourism and sort of not meandered, but have gone a few different ways before you ended up at mobility. I think a lot of people listening to podcasts, big fans of mobility, but what is it about it that you particularly like and find interesting relative to other things that you've done in the past?
Well, I think most of the time you're going to find people in mobility are people, right? Mm-hmm. They love people and they're problem solvers. I think that is the main thing. And so sometimes when they do those tests, what kind of personality you are, we're all typically the same. We love a good problem and we love to solve it. It's very hard to sit on the sidelines and not jump in and try to come across of how can I solve this? And so mobility is really international HR. I mean, you have to know every single thing about HR, but at a global level, right? And so we've become advisors in this. And so, of course, whether people are displaced, how do we resolve this issue? We're going over into this new location. how do we set things up? What are the rules, the compliance, and all of the pieces? So we're really advising our HR colleagues, how to navigate that. And so I think, we just naturally, gravitate to this business.
Because I think that problem solving aspect is quite an interesting one. You've worked in a few different in-house roles. Have you found the problems tend to be quite similar even amongst different companies, or do you think the problems are just always unique and always new to be solved?
People may disagree with me, but on my career path, I think that they're always different based on the company. I mean, there are some similarities for sure, but the nature of the business really drives what kind of problems and issues you get into, or what opportunities. I mean, on the positive side, right? And I mean, every single company in the way that they do business proposes new challenges, new opportunities to get involved in something. So I'm now in a tech company, so we're AI. So this is a whole new exciting future. And just when I think mobility is changing and maybe we're saying goodbye to the old way of doing things, this new door opens about, where do we go with this, and how are we going to use it, and what is mobility going to look like from 2 years from now, from 5 years from now?
I think that's an interesting sort of observation. And the one thing I would add is that even if you can be relocating someone from the US to Ireland, and some random immigration thing can change, or the housing market might completely change. There's always just a lot of natural variation based on macro conditions as well, which always sort of bubble up with new problems. And I think, over the last 5 years with war in Ukraine, COVID, I think maybe lots of new problems to be solved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, while we have really robust, in-house global mobility programs, we rely on our providers, right? And so it's a partnership. And so I'm always looking, when I start out with new providers, relocation companies or immigration, is what do they have? What tech do they have? What experience have they had? And what is their culture? Does it fit with mine? Because I want an extension. I want somebody who's along for the ride. And let's face it, relocation companies have come a long way, and you've got new tech, you've got apps in your hands, you're looking, move management is done differently. We've got the virtual assistants on the app to help our younger population, which is, over half of, I think we just identified that, it's about 60% of our company is the, Gen Zs, Gen Ys.
Okay.
And so we're focusing on that. What do they want? They're not looking for long-term. They're looking for short-term moving. And so they want that stuff in their hand. They love the tech. Everything is about the tech. And so I think relo companies like yourselves are ahead of the game and ahead of the curve on that. So
yes. Oh, well, thank you very much for that. And we sort of definitely agree in terms of the changing demographic of people relocating. Looking in terms of the mobility function itself and the role of global mobility, where do you think that's going in the next 2 to 5 years, as you mentioned?
I think the bigger companies will take a while longer to sort of, as the demographics change. I think it's, you're going to see them still support, their senior employees, their C-suite with traditional mobility. You're going to see some of the people that are already in play, those experienced people, still get relocations. But I think as that changes out, and say 5 years from now, our population is going to be younger, what they're looking for is not long-term. They want to be remote work. They want remote work. They want to be out there. They want to work from anywhere. They don't necessarily want to be tied into one spot. So I think to attract them, to retain them, we're going to need to really move what policies we're offering as a global mobility, and it's more around talent mobility as opposed to there's the talent team and the mobility team, but I think we're going to start to blend more and more together.
Yes, and on that front, this is a very specific question, but I love getting into the nitty-gritty. What do you think that's going to be good for global mobility as working from anywhere, remote work requests become more commonplace and more adopted?
I think it's going to be good, but I think it's going to be challenging, right? So our governments worldwide, there's some countries that are moving and grabbing into it, and they're accelerating and they're making the changes. And there's other countries that are going to be a lot slower. Immigration rules do not change overnight. They can take 10 to 20 years to change. Same with tax. So the companies are going to make, I think, their calls based on their risk tolerance, right? As to what do they feel comfortable doing based on old rules, compliance, risks and compliance rules, and how do they bridge that gap of what their employees, their younger employees want? And I think mobility has a definite role to play here, because we're the assessors, right? We're looking at the rules and regulations, and we're looking at what the company wants, what the employees want, and trying to find that, that even ground where maybe it's not all necessarily compliant, but it works. How do we make it as compliant as we can and work for the employee and still work for the company while meeting our compliance obligations?
Yes, and as an extension to that, how do you think, if you're in a more traditional global mobility function and talent's been quite separate historically, and you're listening to this thinking, oh, I want us to become more aligned with talent mobility, what steps do you think GM teams can take to better align themselves with the talent team, and sort of become that talent mobility function?
Well, I think they have to meet internally. I mean, you have to ask I think you have to talk to your talent team as to what their strategy is and be part of that talent, conversation. But I'm also having discussions with the business leaders. What are they saying? And then trying to figure out between the two, are they aligned? And then, as I've told you, right, I'm at a tech company, so AI is big here. And so we're going to bring in AI. I think you need to make it efficient. You need to be able to slowly transition. Do I think that the normal stuff is going to go away quickly? No. I think it depends on the company as to whether you're going to consider to keep those programs, those traditional programs going. But I think you need to start to bring in the alternatives, and you need to start to bring in the tech to help. So, analytics helps strategize about where, predict where are we going? What is the risk? How quickly can we understand that?
Which I'm going to put you very much on the spot here, of like the time-consuming tasks that people in GM typically do. You've done many. Which areas do you think which tasks are most ripe for being sped up or even fully automated using AI?
I think the strategic piece. I think the analytics have been around for a while. I think we're getting to do that better and faster, to be able to report out to the business what their costs are, where they're spending it, where they're spending it, and how better we can spend it. I think the traditional stuff of, these large policy documents, assignment policies and relocation policies. I'm still in the, infancy stage of learning about the AI and what it's capable. But I think the vision is that AI will be able to go in and read those policies with a well-asked prompt, pull up your templates, reach into your HR systems and your global mobility systems, pull out the employee data, fill it in, and those montane those tasks that have taken us so long to do and the reporting, I think will go away. And I think
Yes.
fairly quickly. I think
Yeah.
those tools are there. It's just, can your company implement them? And are you willing to invest in cleaning up your data so that AI can come in and do the task? Because we have to
Exactly.
clean it up first, right? We have to set
Yes.
it up.
Yeah. You have
And
to be able to connect the dots to
do
make it
I
work.
do I think that will it, displace global mobility people? No. I
No.
think it just gives us, we're always going to need the humans to kind of bring, assess the old and the regulations and compliance and marry that with the new
Yeah.
and resolve the issues. I just think it gives us more time to do the stuff we want to do and
Exactly.
less about
Exactly.
the old stuff, the
Yeah.
Excel spreadsheets and,
Exactly. And I
reading
think
through
if
the policies.
exactly if I was to play that back, it's like data entry, absolutely. Data retrieval from long policy document, absolutely. That's already that they're in big chunks. And I do think support for some of the strategic work in terms of actually analyzing some of the data and making suggestions that then the GM team is editing, sharpening up, cross collaborating. So
Absolutely.
three great areas there that we completely align on, and I think I'm with you as we look at mobility teams typically blending more with talent mobility, a lot more scope for remote work, which I want to jump into in a second. In that world, you've got more maybe personal driven moves or remote work. You've done a great analysis there of the impact on in-house mobility functions. What about
Yeah.
on the vendor side? What do you think the future is looking like on the vendor side of the equation for global mobility?
I think it's really important, more important for the vendors to come on board with, again, the technology, right? And
Yeah,
to partnering with global mobility departments, especially if, I mean, nobody wants to reduce mobility, but I think there will be certain companies due to cost restraints that will be looking to, if they can get that sort of enhanced services from the vendors and reduce maybe how many bodies they have in house. That's
yeah,
certainly an opportunity. But I think vendors that have the technology, that can do the reporting, that can give the hands-on, like the apps and the virtual assistants to their employees, and make the life of the employee easier and faster for them
boom,
to get settled in their new country once they've relocated or on assignment. I think that's going to be
yeah,
more and more important,
yeah.
and I'm already seeing that trend. So I
Love that.
think the more you get sophisticated, it's going to be who
Yeah,
has the best tools is going to be,
yeah, exactly.
yeah,
I think that's a good observation as well. Sort of not only sort of marrying up to the new sort of ways of working, but also that actually often for vendors, it can make more sense to invest in tooling, particularly AI tooling, to help solve problems because, most of the time you're doing it for tens of thousands of employees a year rather than for an individual program. It can be quite challenging as a small GM team to, you know, build your own tooling to automate
exactly.
cost estimates or whatever it might be. And I think that's great. I wanted to go back to remote work, and you mentioned there
Sure.
that you're seeing an increase in it is what employees want, particularly modern employees. Tell me a little bit about your experience on the compliance side first and foremost, because I know a lot of people are just like, oh, it's always illegal to let people work remotely. Like, what are you seeing in terms of allowing it at all from a compliance perspective?
Um, well, I think so. Remote work really came out of the
Yeah,
COVID experience.
yeah,
So I know we made the mistake of saying go home and work, or work,
yeah,
you can work from anywhere. And so when you have a population that come from other countries, they went home. So
yeah.
so we so our best practice on mobility is robust. We built some framework, and it was evolving,
Yeah,
right after COVID, the year after COVID, right up till now, we've been changing it. I think it has settled out as to we know what our program is. We allow for 30 days remote work. It's sort of 20
Nice.
business days. That's
Yeah,
our risk threshold.
I love that.
Um, it's a dead stop no if they don't have the right to work.
Yeah,
We don't argue on that point, and we don't argue on if it is a high risk or restricted country.
nice.
But other than that, we manage the tax implications. It is at the employee request, but we see the business side also leaning into it as an
Okay.
opportunity to allow somebody that requires a longer leave but still needs to meet their business requirements. So
Yeah,
I think I think it's a win-win most of the time for both the business and the
yeah.
employees. Um, but we do track it. We're around probably 80 requests per quarter right now. Um,
Nice.
but it also has a story to it because usually there's some similarities as to why people are asking. Some of them are cultural. Some of
Yeah,
them are, I think that they flag up HR policy issues. So
yeah,
perhaps if we change those policies, we'd have less on the remote side. So
yeah.
I think it's a good, ED&I question for them to look into what's happening here in that
Boom.
perspective. So while we're supporting our employees and the need for our employees to travel, I think it's a win for everybody,
Yeah,
and I think it's a good story for retaining and attracting talent. Um, at a lower risk. I think we surveyed originally for different companies what were they doing, and we felt comfortable in speaking with our immigration and tax companies as well. We felt that 30-day
yeah,
threshold was but
yeah.
we track it. It's not. I know some companies just say. I heard today actually somebody was um, a little bit more flexible, and they were just allowing up to this many days, no questions asked, go do your thing. But
Yes.
I think that is risky, and I think you end up with people staying where they shouldn't be too long, and you get into a little bit of tracking and keeping that framework prevents you having to do a lot of work and a lot of spend later on.
Yes. And so just to play that back, because I think there's so many nuggets in there. One, only letting people go when they have the right to work. Clearly, that is restrictive, but that just does eliminate so many challenges around it. Secondly, you mentioned not restricted or high risk countries. Tell us more about that. Have you gone to your tax provider and asked for a list? Are you using tooling? Have you just created a one-time list of like, here's 10 countries that we just always say no to because we just know, like, tell us about that list.
Yeah, so we internally we have two lists. One is more of a people security, like
Yeah, yeah,
travel risk and compliance. So those are the countries that control risk or ISOS. Any of those sort of
yeah,
agencies would classify as high or extreme risk.
yeah,
And so one, it's always employee safety first.
yeah.
Now we do face the challenges when somebody is actually from those countries and they're going home. So,
True.
there has to be a further in-depth exception look at
Yeah,
for those particular cases. And the other side is restricted countries from taking in your tech. So our business is tech, and we are all about security.
yeah.
That is our main driver. We will never put our customers or clients'
Ex-
information at risk. And
mm,
so those are already set up in house as to could be based on encryption rules or whatever. But so our tech
yes.
doesn't go in, and they don't access our systems from those countries because we are 100% dedicated to our customers and our customers' privacy and
Yeah.
protecting their data.
Yeah, and I think that's something just if you don't have a program is so important just to control that. Super insightful. You mentioned that you get about 80 requests a quarter. Are the majority getting approved? Are there common rejection reasons?
Um, I would say most of them, not, there are some that, like I said, from the parameters that we've set up, that I'll get no. Sometimes the business says no for different reasons. It's not, so we as Global Mobility are the assessors. We're never the approvers. We
Yeah,
will make a recommendation. but the business is going, because the business owns the risk and the cost of anything that happens. They're the decision makers. We just set up the framework and we do the assessment. We provide the assessment, and if we do have things in place. If we feel it's a high risk or there's going to be a cost, then they have to take it up to the leadership team. And usually, if a manager might be a little bit more lenient, certainly our executives will call in no, I don't think this is one we want to support. But I mean, there are a lot of reasons why we're going to support it. Somebody's, family compassionate leave. Of course, we're going to support our employees 100% when we can, and that there's no risk to them or the business. Then we'll support it.
And I love that. And I love to go back to the first part of the conversation where you speak about talent mobility and the future for global mobility being in talent mobility, sort of being the assessors, educating the business on the risk so that you can help them sort of make a high quality judgment call on what is feasible. Because I think intuitively everyone recognizes if you want to attract and retain talent, this is something that can be pitched as a huge benefit.
Absolutely.
And it's cool to hear you talk about how you set it up and some of the well, actually let's wrap up with that. What has it gone well? Have there been unexpected challenges or something that's been surprising in the process?
I think early on we had lots of surprises. We even in our review of the remote work and building the framework around that, we found out people had been in spots for a long period of time, well before COVID. And so we had to, build in the compliance steps and rectify those. Once in a while we get the odd person that isn't aware of, again, it's not a policy, it's a best practice, a robust and, framework around it. And it's well known at this point and everybody generally complies, but every once in a while we have that. But we have an exceptional team in both, Europe and in North America. These managers are skilled and they're at the heart of the pulse of what's going on in their regions. And so they guide our other HR colleagues and the employees. And so I think, we're fortunate that anything that new that does come up, they're already problem solvers. And so they're making recommendations. And I think we'll just always continue to keep it fluid so that we move with the business and we move with what do the new employees and the younger generation want? So that's our future.
Yeah. And if I was to add one more thing, move with the business, what employees want, and also what governments around the world do, because it's heavily impacted by sort of macro immigration, taxes, etc. So, even from security. So just lob that into the, but it's definitely, I think, a big area for mobility to add a lot of value to companies, because traditional mobility might be anywhere from 1% to 3% of total employees a year. Talent mobility often we see from 3 to 20, 30%, depending on how much hiring, whereas workations can often be sort of 50% remote work requests plus, depending on how it's set up, etc., and how enforced it is. So you can have more impact to more people. So as you know, we have a tradition on the pod that the previous guest leaves a question for the next guest, and I think you're going to like this one. The question for you today is, what is one lesson that your career in global mobility has taught you that you think everyone should learn?
Okay. I think that one, the lesson I've learned in mobility is that, you can have a plan, you have to have a solid framework, but if you are not flexible, if you're not constantly learning, if you're not open to new ideas, then you can't solve the new problems. You have to, you can't get stuck. There are, some huge organizations out there that I know that are kind of stuck in what the program is, but mobility is just that. I think whoever designed that word is bang on, and I'm sure it'll change again in the future. But you have to be flexible, you have to be open, and you have to be thinking about how do I support the business? How do I change this to support the business team, to support the employees? And I think if I've learned anything is you can't think, well, no, this is the program and I have to stick to it. You have to be agile, and and that's what makes it exciting.
Exactly. And I think it can be a bit almost cliched in our industry to say, every relocation is unique, and etc. And like, I think people sometimes sort of roll their eyes and go, like, you just think everyone's a special snowflake, and if you take that approach, then everything's going to have like its knock on impact. But there are, like, so often we're always amazed. We try to use technology to standardize as much as possible, but there's so many edge cases in every move, every situation, there's some weird and wonderful thing that is happening, and it just does always keep you on your toes in terms of solving new problems. And I genuinely could agree more that it's almost like embrace that as a cool facet of our industry, rather than trying to be like, well, no, everything needs to be straight, like standardized all the time, because it just doesn't in reality happen like that based on your experiences.
Life isn't like that. So mobility is not like that. And I think we're, I think we're addicted to the fact that it's constantly changing and there's always something exciting or new.
Yeah. And that is definitely part of what makes it fun. So, well, thank you for coming on and sharing so much knowledge, Tamara, across, really the future. Such a big topic in remote work and how that can be an asset, not just like a scary for companies. And last but very much not least, sharing your thoughts on what makes mobility so special. So I've loved having you on.
Thank you for having me.
Not at all.
It's very exciting, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Oh, great. I look forward to having you on again in the future, Tamara, to sort of check in on your sort of predictions for the future of mobility. But until then, have a wonderful day.
Great. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Bye-bye.